50 years ago on this day, I was in a Blackpool cinema in the middle of the night watching the closed circuit televising of the Rumble in the Jungle. It was one of the greatest epiphanies of my entire life, when, having roped the dope, Muhammad Ali came out fighting and flattened fearsome George Foreman, and coming back for the third time as the champion of the world. Muhammad Ali started out as Cassius Clay in the state of Kentucky. He embraced Islam, and the rest is history. Shaun King, the writer and activist, is also from the state of Kentucky, and he has also converted to Islam. Enough! Let's see the one and only Shaun King. Thank you, my dear friend, for joining us this evening. Let's start with that point. You're the second most famous Muslim from Kentucky, and given that the first most famous was the most famous man in the entire world, that's not a bad achievement, Shaun. Tell us how it came about.
I'll take it. No, he's been a hero of mine. I got a chance to even meet him when I was a little boy growing up in Kentucky. And no, I will never be a more famous Muslim or a more famous Kentuckian than him, and that's just fine with me, man.
How did you come to embrace Islam? You were once a Christian pastor.
Yeah, well, I'm in a lot of ways, even my heart for Jesus still always gave me a soft spot, rather, for Islam. You may have heard me tell this story, George, but I first visited a mosque when I was just 16 years old in high school in Kentucky. I didn't grow up in Louisville. I grew up near Lexington, and I went to Jumu'ah prayer for several Fridays as a teenage boy. And even just those early visits, it really planted a seed in my heart. And so for most of my adult life, everybody knew me as a friend of Muslims, as an advocate for Muslims. But I was always doing that as a Christian. And I would do interfaith events. I mean, I've been fighting for Palestine since I was a college student all the way back in 2001. And yet, this year I found myself just so deeply moved by the faith of Muslims, not just in Gaza, but around the world, that it created what was really like an existential crisis for me, where I realized there was something that they had, that they knew, that they understood, that I wanted for myself and my own family. And so it just took me almost on a full circle moment of what I was first exploring as a boy after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And now my wife and I, and even some of our children, have become Muslims. And it's just been a rich, rewarding time for us. And I don't know that I would have been able to even endure the difficulty of seeing all that is happening in Gaza, even if not for my young faith as a Muslim. And so it's even helped me be strong and be determined throughout all of this, George.
Now tell me how people reacted to it, and has that played a part in the kind of shadow banning, outright banning, and other forms of suppression of your thought and your writings?
I was banned from Instagram in December, and that was just a few months before my wife and I embraced Islam. And so even being, I think, Muslim adjacent already created a lot of trouble for me. and so I was banned even before we became Muslims. But no, it hasn't opened any doors for me. But the truth is, and I've had to say this publicly to people, and it's kind of just an admission of my own challenges. I don't know that I would be a Muslim had I not been banned from Instagram. And the way I'm not grateful that they did it, in the sense that it was an injustice, but it also caused me to have space to really think and consider I was so closely associated with the work I did on that singular platform that to lose it caused me to say, well, if I'm not at Shaun King on Instagram, who am I? What direction do I want my life to go in? It just caused me to be able to reflect in a way that I probably never could had I just been grinding along there on the platform. And so what they did was wrong, but if it played even a small part in me embracing Islam, then I'm happy.
And it must have been well received amongst America's very sizable Muslim community. I'm guessing that you're on every invitation list. You're asked to go here, there, and everywhere to give talks and so on. How are you coping with that?
Well, no, Muslims have always been very supportive of me here in the United States, and so I've always been very active in this community, as a friend and as an ally, but not as a fellow Muslim. And so, in a lot of ways, there are two things that I get when I travel, George, and both of them touch my heart. The first is Muslims, not just in the U.S., but even when I'm in the UK or I was just in Malaysia, will always tell me, like, Shaun, I was praying that you would become a Muslim. And when I hear that, it always melts my heart because for me, it's proof that Allah hears us and answers our prayers. But then another thing I hear it every day. I saw people say it just a few minutes ago on my LinkedIn page. A lot of people thought I already was a Muslim. And that I also take that as a great compliment because people saw me fighting for Muslims around the world for years and years. I see now that I've become a Muslim, people always tell me, including Muslims, like, Shaun, it really surprised me when I saw you take your Shahada because I already thought you were a Muslim. And so I embrace it. But Muslims have always been so kind to me, man.
Now, those millions of Muslims in America all have votes next week. I'm taking the stance, I took it earlier in the show with Professor Khalid Beydoun, that no Muslim voter in America should and could in conscience reward the Biden-Harris administration for the crimes that they have committed against their co-religionists in Gaza and now in Lebanon. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with you, George. And it wasn't an easy path for me to get there because I understand that when you refuse to vote for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, that it means that it's highly likely, almost guaranteed, that you won't have an ally in the White House either way. And so Muslims have really been put into a corner. And for me, I'll just tell you how I got here. I have to vote my conscience. And there come times where you say, listen, this vote may violate some of my principles, but it doesn't completely violate my identity or my heart or who I am or my people. This is one of I heard the callers that were on here before me say the same thing. Like, if genocide is not a red line for somebody, it says way more about them than it does us, George. And there is never, there is really nothing that Kamala Harris could do tomorrow or any day before election day. I mean, outside of becoming a Muslim, that would convince me that she's going to be any different here. In fact, she's gone out of her way to reject Muslim voters, Palestinian American voters. And I have known really, really good people that wanted to win her over and that gave her chance after chance after chance. I wouldn't even say to meet them halfway, but just to show like a little glimmer of integrity. And she has refused at every corner. And so far less than Muslims abandoned the Democratic Party abandoned Muslims in ways that have just been so profound and insulting. It breaks my heart for somebody like Sister Rashida Tlaib, who I know she's a Democrat. She is a part of the Democratic Party, and she's the only Palestinian American at any level of the federal government. And she has been just completely abandoned. And to see her have to stand against Joe Biden and stand against her own party. If she can do that, we can do it. And this is an opportunity for Muslims to not only say, hey, I'm keeping my integrity, but I'm teaching the people that support genocide from both parties that when you do this, you will lose my vote.
Yeah, I mean, that is a pretty fundamental reason why we made some breakthroughs, not enough, in British politics on the 4th of July earlier this year. Not only did the now ruling Labour Party lose 5 parliamentary seats, but they nearly lost 5 more, or more than 5 more.
Yep.
The ones they nearly lost were to me, unfortunately, but they lost hundreds of thousands of votes that would normally have gone to them. And if you think about democratic politics in that way, that's the only power that you have, to withhold your support from people who not only don't deserve it, but are making it very clear to you they don't care whether you think they deserve it or not. It's a matter of self-respect, isn't it?
It is, George. And I've been very honest and transparent. You know, even though I've really been an independent for most of the past 8 years, I worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016 and 2020. I have voted in every presidential election since I've been 18 years old. I'm 45 now. And I have voted for Democrats in every one of those elections. And so I say that not as a matter of pride, but to say, like, this has been a thing I have done. Like, my normal practice, even if I had to hold my nose, was to support the Democratic candidate, even if it was somebody I ran against. This is one of those times where I cannot maintain my normal practice. I have to abandon the way I would normally vote. And what I see here in New York and New Jersey, when I travel all around the country, it's hard for me to find any Muslim voters that are going to support the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate. And I see this all over the country, in red states and blue states and swing states. I think Muslim voters are going to make an enormous difference. My hope, and this is going to be painful for people to hear this, my hope is that Kamala Harris loses this election and that the Democratic Party learns a very, very painful lesson, that when you do something as atrocious as genocide, you will lose voters. And it sounds even stupid, George, to say those words, because of course that should be the case, but they are expecting us to simply support them through this. And I could never do it. Millions of Muslim voters in swing states. I've been to Michigan maybe 6 times in the past 6 months. I live very close to Pennsylvania. Muslim voters in these states, many of them are going to be voting for Dr. Jill Stein, but I've struggled to find any who are going to be supporting Kamala Harris or Donald Trump.
Now that you're no longer Shaun King at Instagram, where can people find you? Because it was already the case, and I know that once our big audience has watched this interview tonight, people will be wanting to follow you, to hear what it is that you've got to say, to read your writings. How can people do that, Shaun?
Sure, George. Well, first, I appreciate you, and I admire the good work that you do, and I was proud of you over this past year for your fight. And sometimes the best we can do, George, is make sure that they know they can't abuse us without getting punched in the mouth, without us fighting back. It's like, hey, but we will fight back, and sometimes we will win, sometimes we'll lose, but we're fighters at heart. And George, I know you're a fighter, and so that's always why I've had so much love for you. But people can find me on Telegram. That's probably the best place to find me, where I can kind of speak the most pure truth. But I'm also on YouTube as well. And if you just type my name in either of those platforms, I have a verified account there. You can find me. But George, a ton of my work now is offline, and it may just be for a season or for the next year or so. But I've really thrown myself into doing a lot of humanitarian work in Gaza and the West Bank. I love the work. I am enriched even by doing it. But I hope to be able to do more of what I used to do online eventually. But even people may be disappointed if they go to Telegram or YouTube. I'm not nearly as active as I used to be.
Well, God bless your work, and if you need any help with it, just let us know and we'll bring it to everyone's attention. It's been an honor talking to you, brother. Thank you so much for joining us
on the Mother of All
Talk Show. Shaun King, writer and activist.